Hello there, digital world. Welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced in Later. It is once again movie review time. No, it is not the Expendables 4 or Expendables or whatever the hell it's called. I know that's the most popular thing on the internet right now is to talk about how trash that movie is. I'd love to participate in that, but unfortunately that movie does not come out here in Australia for another 2 or 3 weeks, so you'll just have to wait on that one. Instead, shockingly, we are reviewing something on this podcast, a movie that was released to Netflix, part of an ongoing franchise that I'm pretty sure no one even knows that it exists, that it is on Netflix, that it came out, that it's been out for a few days now, and I'm pretty sure even the people that do know just don't care. And I'm pretty sure this review is not going to do much to help its case, but you never know. Also, just a little housekeeping for you. As I leant on my armrest on my chair to record this, I think I accidentally broke through the wood. My arm sunk into there, which is fine. But if you hear wood splintering or screaming, that's probably why. So today we're reviewing Spy Kids Armageddon, which is another Spy Kids movie, the fifth in the franchise of family-friendly kiddie action spy films from famous director Robert Rodriguez, who has a very distinct style and flair. He's done quite a few good movies in his time. The first Spy Kids movie came out in 2001, I'm pretty sure. Maybe 2000. It definitely bang on the turn of the 21st century and all that shit. And here we are in 2023 and we're getting another one. Now, I have to say, I ummed and ahed about whether I would even review this one before I watched it, and even a little bit after I watched it, because for something like this, for someone like me to come on the internets or the Spotifys or whatever and be like, oh, this movie's so garbage and crap and blah, blah, blah. I mean, if ever there was a statement that a movie is not made for you, it's a kid's movie. It's a silly kiddie movie that's not designed to make sense or be emotional or moving or anything like that. It's nice when they are, but for the most part, they are made just to be bright sounds and colors and things that will distract your children for a certain amount of time. Hopefully the movie's at least good enough that you as a parent can inevitably watch it with them 500 and 600 times if a kid likes it. But for the most part, as an adult, as a movie reviewer, to look at Spy Kids Armageddon and be like, okay, compared to Oppenheimer and Citizen Kane and all of that, this is trash, isn't particularly fair. And also, for the Spy Kids franchise, for any sort of franchise that continues to exist long after you've grown out of the target demographic, you as a viewer have to understand that what you are critiquing is most likely just the same thing. It's just your perception of it, your ability to receive and perceive it is very different. When the original Spy Kids movies were coming out in the early 2000s, I was a kid. I was the target audience for those movies. So as such, I had a great time with them. I loved them. If I go back and watch them now, I still enjoy them, but that's a nostalgia thing. That's me remembering my childhood. Remember the feelings that I felt watching the movies. I can take them in a different light, but at the end of the day, I'm still having a good time just living in memory land, I guess, just back in my childhood. The original Spy Kids in 2001 starred, I can't really remember the names of the kid actors. I think Daryl Sabara played the boy, Junie, and Alexa Vega? No, that's probably not right. Played Carmen, the girl. Mainly, you remember Antonio Banderas, who plays the kid's father, and Carla Gugino, who plays their mother. But the concept of Spy Kids was a really fun family-style movie in sort of this outlandish make-believe world where two spies have kids and retire from spying, or they keep spying, I'm not exactly sure. But they keep their children in the dark. They have a bit of a strained relationship between them. They try to take down a villain, a kooky James Bondy style villain. They're captured, so the kids have to learn that their parents are spies and then take on their gadgets and essentially their mission to save their parents and save the world. It's a very simple concept, but it's done very, very well, I think. It is very goofy. It's very silly nonsense with bright colors and silly throw up gags and all of that stuff. But I think there was also an emotional heart to it, which has not been replicated as much as that first one. I mean, a lot of what that movie is about is the relationship between a father and son, mainly. Antonio Banderas does not understand his kids' interests. In the 2000s, he's into a crazy kids show. He's obsessed with the merchandising of all that. Everything that Antonio Banderas cannot relate to, which really puts a strain on them to be able to bond. To a point where Junie's even tempted by the villain of the movie because he is relatable to him in a way that his father isn't. So it's learning to understand your child, realize that your parents always have your good intentions at heart, all those things that you want your kids to learn as they're growing up so they don't resent you when they grow up and move out. Really great acting in it, some really great stuff. As an adult, you can watch Spy Kids and have fun with it, especially with Antonio Banderas' performance, I think. There are some adult humor and gags and references that goes over a child's head, but you yourself will enjoy. So I think that Spy Kids movie holds up. The second and third, the second I think is quite good too. As in most sequels, it is probably lesser than the first, but it builds on that world in a way with the Spy Kids franchise, the OSS, the Island of Monsters. That meme of Steve Buscemi saying, "Do you think God stays in heaven because he lives in fear of what he has created?" That's from a Spy Kids movie. That's the most existentially crisis type quote in the whole world, and that comes from Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams. By the time you got to the third Spy Kids, it turns into a bit of a mess. They went for a cheap 3D gimmick where the Spy Kids get sucked into a video game and there's less story and more just visuals. But it's still done in a fun way. It's no one goes, I feel like a good movie, I'm going to watch Spy Kids 3D. Especially because you can't even watch the 3D now. It's those old red and blue glasses 3D, which, like Jaws 3D. You can't really experience that in that way. I did. I went to the movies and saw it in 3D. I remember I was the only one in that theater. So I guess Spy Kids' popularity was waning by 2006. But it's goofy, it's silly, it's fun. So that's a solid trilogy. I believe a fourth one came out in 2011. I saw it once. But that's where I realized that I had grown out of the concept of Spy Kids. Now, I maintain the fourth Spy Kids isn't actually good for a few other reasons, but it more or less is a continuation of that franchise. Those characters, Carmen and Junie, come back in that, but you essentially follow a new family with a single mother, Jessica. Well, no, she's not a single mother. I think Joel McHale was her husband or boyfriend. I don't really remember. There was a baby Spy Kid in that one. It was a bit more goofy. There was the smell-o-vision stuff that was coming out with it, where you go to the movie and you'd have like a scratch and sniff to smell the things the characters are smelling. And I believe one of the options was smell the baby's poopy diaper, which is weird. But if you watch all four of those movies together and you watch the fourth one, as much as you don't like the fourth one, you do recognize it is the same style, the same humor. It's just sort of not for you anymore. So that's fine. I have no desire to watch Spy Kids 4 again. But I don't be like, oh, it's a terrible movie or anything like that. I think it was just the Spy Kids for me had ended. And honestly, I thought Spy Kids for everyone had ended. But here we are in 2023 and there's a fifth one. If you want to know what it's about, I guess it's sort of a reboot, I guess. It doesn't really exist in the Spy Kids world that has been established. It's essentially redoing it with new protagonists. You've got a new family where Zachary Levi's the dad and Gina Rodriguez is the mother. They're the spies that keep their spying a secret from their two kids, a boy and a girl. They have to save their parents and stop a villain from doing something evil. And that villain is also a public perception person where the kids have seen him on TV and all that. Very similar to that first Spy Kids thing. So they have to rescue them, save the world, yada, 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 yada. Very, very classic Spy Kids stuff. Reviewing this again is difficult because, especially with something with kids starring in it, I'm not about to be like, the kids were bad actors or the kids were good actors. The kids are kids. Like, good for them that they're, I think they're 7 and 8. They're the youngest I've ever seen Spy Kids, unless they've always been that age and I'm just an old man now. But to headline your own movie, regardless of what it is, to say all those lines, pretty insane. So you will not hear me going, the kids are not as good as the originals or they're better or anything like that. Just not commenting on the performances because that's silly. What I guess I'm commenting on is, will fans of Spy Kids want to see this film? Will they appreciate it? Or will the brand new young'uns and families like and appreciate this movie as much as the first one? And before I saw it, I was all set up to be like, that's probably what I'm going to say. It's like, it's not for old people. It's the tastes are different, but I'm sure families will get a kick out of it. And I guess that's kind of true. But there's some stuff about it and there's some things in it and the way it's done that I actually think is pretty not good and not worth anyone's time. So I gotta do this delicately. But basically, it is completely a reboot, and it is also just the first Spy Kids movie with a new skin on it. And I mean that in the most basic sense. With brand new characters, you're not with the Cortezes as you were in the original Spy Kids. You got a brand new family and a new villain and all of that stuff. But almost beat for beat, it is the same sequence of events as the first Spy Kids movie, just with less emotional weight to it. And I would say effort put into it. You have the dad not understanding his son's interest in video games. You have a mad villain who has created something that kids enjoy, and he has good intentions about how he wants to perceive the world, but he's going to destroy the world in his quest to do that. The parents get kidnapped and held for ransom. The kids run off to a safe house where they have to use their full names to get inside. They look at all the cool gadgets. Fake OSS agents show up to try and get them. They gotta sneak into the base to save their parents, and then they gotta do some other stuff. It is really just the first movie again. With, I guess, a positive to it would be, it seems like it's also trying to pull from every single Spy Kids movie. Like the video game stuff where they have to go into the video game that this movie is called. There's a movie they're trying to stop or whatever. Don't ask me to explain what the video game is, because I don't think even the movie exactly knows, one, what the video game was, or two, what any video game is, how it works. I'll get to that in a minute, I think. But they do have to go into the video games. They have to get on cool super suits. They're up in front of CG screens, all of that. It's very Spy Kids 3. They're chased by skeletons in the real world, pulling that from Spy Kids 2. And I can't say how much from Spy Kids 4 is in here, because I've only seen it that one time. But there is a point where the girl Spy Kid opens the drawer with watches in it and says, "We have all the time in the world," which is, I guess, a reference to the fourth Spy Kids movie, because that's what that movie was called. I don't know if those watches were the watches from the fourth one, and I really don't think I should really care that much about it. So in that instance, if it's the exact same movie as the first one, just with a different skin on it and less effort and emotion and all of that in there, I guess I would say if you're a Spy Kids fan, there's no point watching it because you've seen it. You may as well just watch the first one again. And if you're brand new kids, families, all of that stuff, looking for a movie to watch, you could watch this one and you might enjoy it. But I guarantee you're better off just watching the first one, because you'll get the exact same experience, but you'll probably get more out of it, I think. I guess it's coming down to, someone explained this brilliantly to me recently, which is reboots and reimaginings. And they used Homer as an example. I'm going to go a bit off tangent here when I talk about it. So we won't be talking about Spy Kids much anymore, but I don't have that much to say about it. I'm just trying to explain to you why I think this movie doesn't work in a way that doesn't come down to, it's shit, I don't like it, I didn't think it was cool. So someone did a really long video essay, I think his name was Real Jims on YouTube, I can't remember, about how Homer is a millennial, Homer Simpson on The Simpsons, because of The Simpsons' floating timeline, not the characters never aging, it being a status quo show, how they're always set in the present of whatever the current age is that the new episode comes out. Homer and Marge started out as people in high school in the 70s, but over time they were in high school in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. To a point where Homer essentially was a kid now, and a time where Bart was also a kid. And it's changing that up to fit to what appeals to people. You know, if you're watching it as an adult, The Simpsons now, and they do flashbacks, you're now getting the same reaction that your parents got when they watched the older Simpsons. They had a flashback to the 70s. And while there is a little like, okay, I guess nothing really matters in The Simpsons because it's constantly changing, it does explain kind of why it's still going after 36 years, because they are reinventing and reappealing the show to the current market of watching it. Like, people who watch The Simpsons ideally are probably on the younger side, you know? I was mainly a teenager when I had my big Simpsons heyday, and I think that's what a lot of other people are getting at too. So you have to adapt it. You have to change it. Homer has to use TikTok. They have to talk about canceling people on Instagram, you know, all of that stuff that's relevant now that I don't kind of understand, even though I'm only 31 years old. I'm not quite 31 yet. I jumped ahead of myself. A couple more weeks to go. So in that essence, while it's stressful, it's a way that keeps The Simpsons going, I think. In the same way that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, which I just reviewed recently, works now as a movie. Because it's adapted the Turtles to the current day. So the Turtles essentially are Zoomers in that movie. You know, they talk about getting the likes on whatever social media they're using. You know, they talk about the Avengers and pop culture, because that's the big thing at the moment. It's just to talk about all the movies, the superhero movies and the TV shows you're streaming and all of that stuff. So immediately you invigorate the Turtles for a new generation so that they can watch it and enjoy it and relate to the characters. But you also don't alienate the original Turtles fans, because while it's strange to see the Turtles doing something different, it's also fresh and new. You can get a new experience out of the Turtles sort of doing the same thing you've seen them do before, because they're tackling it a different way. Whereas with Spy Kids Armageddon, for a movie that's made in 2023, fifth installment of a franchise that started in the early 2000s, it doesn't seem that interested in updating the Spy Kids world to be relevant to now. They essentially have done the same movie from 2000s, but they're not changing it up or making the kids different or anything like that I think a kid for today would appreciate. And if you don't have that edge to it, then what really is the point of making another movie if you're just going to do the same thing again? The bad guy in the movie, the villain who's creating video games, even says during the movie that video games never got better before the 21st century. So all his graphics and all that. I think it's him, the movie, explaining why their CG is kind of shit, but I sort of get the vibe of it. It's like he's remembering a time when things were better, which is hard to appeal to a new audience who play bloody God of War, the Spider-Mans on the PS games, Nintendo Switch stuff, who just, games are insane. And they're like, oh, okay, whatever. And there's not a commitment even to really engage. They want to be a part of that video game world, but not enough to learn about it. The video game that is featured in this is called High Score, I think. The sequel to Low Score. I don't know why it's called that. And the villain, he starts his plan by hacking the world with an Armageddon virus. So everyone gets locked out of their ATMs, their cars, their smart houses, all of that stuff. To access your stuff, you have to beat the game. And I do not understand what beating the game means in that context. The most frustrating scene is the kids jump in a car with their parents, and both cars have been locked by the game. So the kids go, we've got to beat the game. Let's do it. And they just mash. They don't even mash the screen. Their fingers are just flying around, pressing the air. And they're like, yes, we did it. Meanwhile, over there, the parents are going, what, 1 player or 2 player? What does that mean? It's just sort of like lazy, I guess. If you're going to make the video game such an essential part of this movie, you got to explain it. The Spy Kids 3D game, for as much as it was a marketing gimmick to use 3D, there were rules. You understood how the game worked. It was very basic, but you could follow along. You got it. In this, it's just sort of like, meh, it's just a game, whatever. Floop's television show and the original Spy Kids, in complete contrast. By the time that movie ended, you knew who Floop and Minion were. You knew about his Saturday morning show. You knew what the thumblings were? Is that what they were called? The creatures that were all thumbs? Whatever. Though I think there was more attention to detail. Now, if this were a completely different plot in the new Spy Kids, I would just say, it's for children. It's fine. It's not up to the standard of the original, but, kids can get a kick out of it. But if you are going to do the exact same movie with just a different skin, but not even update it to be the present fads and everything like that, there really is no point to it. You are better off just watching the original Spy Kids. And I say that for all people, for fans of the franchise who are tuning back in to a movie after the last one came out 12 years ago. Your kids are probably adults now. I don't know. And kids probably aren't going to be that entertained by it. They're probably just going to be bored because there's nothing relatable for them. There's nothing for them to latch onto. And if it's going to be the exact same thing, just watch the original, I guess. It's not even... I'm not even going to rate this thing. There's no point rating it because I just feel nothing for it. I don't hate its existence. I understand its purpose. I just think it sort of fails in what it sets out to do. But it doesn't harm anyone by existing, I guess. If you're a 31-year-old person and you're mad that the fifth Spy Kids movie wasn't as good as the first one in 2001, I don't know, maybe you need to do something else. I guess. At the end of the day, would I recommend it? Not really. But I don't have kids. If you are stressed out by them and you need them to be zoned into something for a bit, this is on Netflix. If you have Netflix, it's ready and available for you. I would recommend that if the other Spy Kids are on there, put the first one on because it's better. But at the end of the day, it does matter. Nothing really matters, I guess, is the moral of this. Well, specifically not the fifth Spy Kids movie. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. Next week will be something. I won't have seen a movie by then, I don't think. Unless I go see The Creator. I never planned on seeing that, but I've seen so many trailers for it. Apparently it's the best sci-fi film in decades. I don't know. So I may end up seeing that and reviewing it. If not, I think we'll be doing something for the MCU. I don't know. We'll be eating time until I can see just how terrible Expendables is. So be sure to be sticking around and tune in for all that. But as always, thank you very much for listening. I do really appreciate it, even if it's just nonsense like the last 23 minutes was. It means a lot to me. Until next week, stay safe, stay kind, stay lovely to one another. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.